welcome back to Warm Embers. Yes, I have an amazing guest today, the beautiful Jill Sherman-Warne, and I absolutely love yapping with her. I could yap for hours. She has tons of
Same
amazing
here.
experience. I just love learning from her, sharing with her, discussing tribal sovereignty with her. So, I worked with her in environmental, so she has years and years of experience. I know she looks like she's 25, but believe me, she's working environmental forever. So, Jill, I just want to start
Thank
out with
you.
you have an amazing story to tell about you were in a car accident and you're sitting here walking, doing all the things. So, can you share about that?
Yeah. So my name is Jill Sherman-Warne, and I'm an enrolled member of the Hoopa Indian Reservation, which is located in Northern California. And of course, we have the largest land-based reservation that exists in California currently. And I say currently because tribes are reclaiming their ancestral territories, which is an amazing thing. And I have served on my tribal council. My father served on my tribal council. My brother served as the tribal chairman for many years. And so I was fortunate as a child to have different chairmen over the years of growing up. Come to the house, and for me, that was our movie star. Was the chairman's here. Me and my brother and sister would be like little kids, like the chairman's at our house, and I think we've lost that to a certain extent today. And I don't know how exactly we regained that. And it didn't mean that my father or my family agreed with whatever chairman was coming to dinner or happened to be coming to dinner. It meant that the position itself was the position of chairman is the thing that was respected, and we could still disagree with however we diverted from each other in terms of how the tribe should be moving forward. And that was a good thing. And today it's not like that. But I moved to from Northern California. I met my husband, or my husband to be, moved to Southern California, was enticed to moving to Southern California and started working for Pechanga, which is a tribe in Southern California, as their environmental director, as their Proposition 5 grassroots campaign coordinator, and then Proposition 1A, which was the big gaming propositions, and then as their environmental director, which really had to do as a result of my experience as a grant writer. And so I found a home at Pechanga for 10 years and then bounced to Viejas, and then kind of fell in with the Native American Environmental Protection Coalition, which I had been a board member to during my time at Pechanga and Viejas. And now I'm the executive director, and I do a whole lot of other things. I feel like I'm one of those kids, that volunteers their mom, except I'm volunteering myself to
Yeah.
do things. But I think it's hard when you feel like you want to serve your people. And if you can't serve, oftentimes we as tribal members try to serve our own tribal nations. And sometimes, as the saying goes, you can't be a prophet in your own land, right?
Yes,
So sometimes,
I totally
sometimes
get that.
it means that you have to be a prophet, or not a prophet per se, but that being with other tribal people, you get the respect and the acknowledgement as a professional, and with your knowledge of being tribal as well. It's a plus. It's not necessarily a requirement. So I think it's still very important that we as tribal people hire tribal people to do tribal work, because
Yes.
it's innate.
Yeah.
It's innate. You can't really learn it,
Mhm.
because you can learn it, but you can't feel it the way a native person can.
Yes, I totally agree. As a Navajo person and Oglala also, I live in Southern California and work with SoCal tribes. My husband's SoCal. So I totally get the perspective you're coming from, that we are able to also get in those spaces and we want to advocate for our people, our nations. So
Yeah, and it's always been an honor to know you and work with you as well, because I feel like, as tribal professionals, we both understand that place that we come from, and I think that's something we don't get with non-natives. I
mhm.
mean, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Not
So
that we're not willing, our arms are open. Here we are.
yes. Well, the only thing is that they come in and they say, we want to work with you. And then they like data scrape and then they go write their papers. And then the footnote, it'll be like this tribe or whatever. And then all of a sudden they go do the presentation on their project. And the further they get out from the time period, the less it's tribal centered and it's more about them. And then all
Yeah.
of a sudden they've created this whole platform and this whole professional career upon the data they scrape from a tribe, but the tribe is no longer part of that presentation, which is so
I
sad.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's because they themselves don't are unable to wrap themselves around the idea that we are actually political citizens of our government. And that's why I always preface I'm an enrolled member of my tribe because the we have so many, and bless their hearts. I think most of the time people's hearts are in the right place. But if you are just a race, if your attachment to a tribe is that you are a consider yourself a part of that race, Native American, it's different than being a political citizen of your government. Because when you're a political citizen of your government, you deeply understand the importance of your tribal elections, your tribal laws, and that they are in fact laws, right?
Yeah.
And so it's just very different. And I know we are oftentimes afraid to talk about the difference between being an enrolled tribal member and somebody who is just recognizing themselves as a member of a race. I could say I'm French, but it doesn't mean that, I have French blood ancestry, but it doesn't mean that I'm French, right? I don't speak a lick of French. And if I went to France and said, hey, y'all, I'm your, an ancestor, my ancestor was French, they would be like, oh, like, who is this American?
Yes. Oh, I did notice a lot of like in the entertainment field because I was doing these little segments on fashion because I absolutely love fashion. Of like I would look at a Native American actor or entertainer and then go on the Getty and then pull their screenshots and then discuss their. Well, I kind of put a pause on it because as I start researching the heritage of a lot of them, they are not truly North American Native, which I don't have a problem with, but it's when they get in the political spaces and they want to start talking for us. That's where my issue is like, well, you don't have the same lived experience that we have to be able to speak on these
Yeah.
things.
And I think that would be important. I've not really listened a lot to because there's so many Canadian actors in the space of Hollywood. Because Hollywood doesn't understand the political associations that we have, or the fact that as Native Americans in the United States, it's Congress that has the ability to negotiate rules and laws with us, not the president,
Yes.
much as he would like to think so. Not the president, not the state legislature. It is all up to the U.S. Congress, and the fact that we are in the founding documents of this country speaks to who we are. And so when you have a Canadian actor, and Canada has a huge space for actors and
Yes.
playwrights and script writers and things. They have a long history of having that on their television, and we as Americans don't have that.
Yes.
And so we're still kind of this unknown thing, and Hollywood hasn't caught up to the idea that, oh, wait a minute, there are people who have cards, like I have my AKA registration.
Yeah.
American Kennel Association. I mean, because that's the only thing you can put it to, is that I am an enrolled member of my tribe, and thus I'm a political citizen of my tribe. And so that concept is very difficult to understand. Yeah.
And then also I've noticed because I'm launched into the art spaces. As I notice more, like you were saying, Canadian natives are in the art spaces, but they really fund their fellowships and art. Like if somebody wanted to go into art, somehow they have programs for them. Whereas America, we don't really have that. It's more of like, no, you're not going into art, you're going to be a finance person or whatever. So I thought that was interesting too.
Yeah, no, we just don't do it the same way. And but the flip side is also they have different battles in Canada than we do in the United States.
Yeah.
So it's almost like, comparing us, even though nobody has ever said this, to Aborigines of Australia, that Canadian Indians are very much like, in terms of how they're treated, and their whole history is very different
Yeah.
from the US history. And so we need to look at it that way. We as natives have a hard time because they look so similar to us, right?
Yes.
They're like,
Yes.
oh, they're natives, they're because they do, like Oneida and a lot of the Seneca, like, there are those cross boundaries. Even here in Southern California, people don't really realize that we have Kumeyaay Indians who were on the Mexican border. Like the borders are arbitrary in terms of the people, but because of laws, it doesn't mean that those people are citizens of federally recognized tribes either.
Yeah, that's a good point. So, if we can go back to your amazing journey, love to share and discuss
Yeah.
it because you are amazing.
Well, I'm amazing because I'm a survivor. I always tell people, if you're really going to try to kill me, you better get that old, you better get your GSA on, and get one of those old U.S. military tanks, because that might be what it takes. But as you know, I was hit by a drunk driver, and it was a head-on collision. According to the police report, or the CHP report, it was 95 miles an hour. So 95 miles an hour head-on collision. And I, fortunately, at the time was driving a 1998 2000 or 1998 Acura Integra, not 2000, it's 1998 Acura Integra. And so it was actually made out of metal, because most of our cars are made out of plastic, right? These days,
Yes, they are.
plastic or something.
Oh,
And so it was tough. And the vehicle that hit me was a Cadillac Escalade. And so when we hit head on, it came and used my car as a ramp, and there was nothing I could do because there were guardrails on both sides of the road. And so I had tried to move. I had slowed down, because like to 10 miles an hour or something, and tried to be at a standstill alongside the guardrails, and the car just hit me and lifted my car up and smashed me back down on the guardrails. So I was smashed in there, and I was knocked out. you know, the funniest thing that I think about, not that the accident was actually horrific, but
yes.
when I came to, which I wasn't knocked out very long, I'm like looking, right, and I'm looking at the trees, and I'm thinking, why did I pull off in the campground and go to sleep? Like, I
Wow.
guess I must have been tired, because I was feeling tired. I'm like, I know I'm tired. And then I looked at the tree. I was seeing the tree leaves, and I realized, wait a minute, those aren't 10 oak trees. Those are those are black oak trees. They're a whole different oak tree. Like, wait a minute. I'm in Southern California, because I thought that I was in Northern California for a minute.
Uh,
And then someone came to my door and was like, "Hey, are you okay?" And I looked at him, and I'm like, "Yeah, I've been in an accident," stating the obvious. And he's like, "Yeah." And he goes, "Is there anyone you could call?" And I couldn't remember my husband's phone number. And I'm like, "Give me a minute." For some reason, I can't remember. And he's like, "Okay, it's okay." He was on his phone, and he was talking to somebody. I wish I knew who that person was, because he called my husband and let him know. I had just spoke to my husband like 5 minutes before, and he said, it's bad, and it was. At the time, I didn't realize, like, my whole roof was smashed down on me, and so I didn't realize I was like scrunched down, and then I'm looking around, and I see what I think is my bone out of my
no
coming through my
way.
arm. And so then, again, I'm like, what is this? And then I feel it. And I'm like, wow, it really is my bone. But, touching it doesn't hurt. But my body was in shock,
Yeah,
obviously.
definitely.
And it took them about an hour to, a little over an hour, to cut me out of my car, because they had to cut the whole roof off, and all that stuff. And um, they were at one point feeling, so they got the roof off, and again, one of the firefighters who, because they had to put a tarp over me when they were cutting it, I said, I don't know you, but can I hold your hand? And he's like, yes. And I held his hand, but all I could feel was the glove. And I was like, he just put a glove in my hand. Like, I
That's what
couldn't,
I'm thinking. Yeah, you're like,
I
hey.
could feel his hand, but maybe I wasn't able to grab it really hard. And then at one point when they were getting ready to take me out of the car, or lift me out of the car, they couldn't feel my pulse. And so they were feeling around in my neck. I could feel them feeling my neck. And I felt like I was way far away. I'm like listening to it all.
Huh?
And I heard him say, she's responding to us, but she has no pulse. And so then 3 different people were trying to touch me and touch my neck. And they had, I think, a blood pressure cuff on my arm. And it was like I felt like I was coming back to myself. I know it sounds weird, but it's like, oh, heck no, I'm not dying. My mom had just been
Oh,
diagnosed with dementia. I had just had my grandson born a couple months before, and I'm thinking I have too much, and I was, please, creator, do not allow me to have a brain injury, be paralyzed. Like, I have too many people depending on me. And I had prayed that right before I had gotten hit. And so they got me out, and oh my God, I was in so much pain. I felt like my leg was going to fall off. And, all these crazy things go through your mind. They start cutting my clothes off. And I'm
like time slowed down, like how they say, like,
no, I felt like everything took so long because I was in so much pain. I
oh,
thought I was really trying to be tough,
yeah,
and holding it in, but apparently I was screaming. And there were moments that, like, when I do know that I screamed out when they tried to use I forget what they're called to spread it apart.
like the jaws.
Jaws of Life,
Yeah.
that they had tried to use one to spread my car further apart because it was all smushed up. And when they did it, it really started pinching my legs. So I know I started screaming at that point, like, please, please, please stop.
Yeah.
Because they needed to do it on both sides of the car, not just one. And so when they got me out of the car, that's when I really started feeling all the pain. And I was cursing IHS. Well, first I was upset that they were cutting my pants off, and I wasn't even embarrassed about being naked in front of anybody. I was mad because they were my favorite pair of pants. And
Uh,
then it was a belt that I had just bought. And
uh,
then the suit jacket that I had on was, like $90. And I was like, they're cutting that whole thing off. Like, I was really upset. It probably wasn't self anyway, but I was mad about the cost of my clothes ever being cut off. And I do remember, like, the firemen trying to use their jackets to shield me, but I was fine with it. And then they finally get me into, or they were lifting me up and putting me in the back of the ambulance. And I'm like, why is nobody worried about my leg falling off? Because I felt like my leg was falling off. And I kept saying, my leg. And it was like they weren't responding to it. So then they put me in the back of this ambulance that, I swear, I was thinking, damn it, IHS, why couldn't you buy an ambulance with good shocks? Because I felt like it was an old ambulance that was hitting every single bump in the road, and there was my leg probably falling off. Nobody was paying attention. And so I was mad that IHS didn't give us a better ambulance. And then I was life flighted right to the trauma center. And in the helicopter, when we get to the helicopter, I don't know what I was thinking. I thought it was going to be this gigantic helicopter, right? But no, it was like this helicopter where your face is like this far from the roof.
Stop. Oh my
And I'm like,
gosh.
what a cheap helicopter that they put me in. And the helicopter ride felt like it took forever, because I was thinking, are they taking me to LA? Like, where are they taking me to? It's like, can I get to the hospital already? Because my leg is falling off.
Oh my gosh, all the thoughts you're thinking.
Yeah, and then when we finally got to the hospital, fortunately, my husband was there.
Yes.
And I guess they left my shoes on because the first helicopter was carrying the girl who hit me, who unfortunately passed, it's highly unusual that the drunk driver is the one to die.
Yeah.
It's usually the other person. So that was another aspect of it. And so they were trying to get him off the roof of the hospital's the garage or whatever it was on. And he's like, I'm not leaving. My wife is coming. And then the second helicopter I was in, and he recognized my shoes. I was like, I never thought he paid attention to my shoes, but I guess he does. And
Oh,
I'm screaming again. I'm screaming because like my leg, it literally like it was dragging on, like it felt like it was just hanging on by skin. And
really? Oh my, that must be
it's so
so.
then I see him, right? He gets up to me and I see him and I'm thinking, why do they let my hair all be in my face? I can't see anything. And so I'm like trying to touch my head, and they're all like, don't touch it. And I said, I'm sorry, I got in an accident. He's like, no, 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 no. And then, that was kind of the last memory besides being jostled about. And my hip, of course, was broken. And so they had to reset that. And
Uh-huh.
believe me, and I ended up going into a very long surgery. And the, like, I literally, most people are afraid to go into surgery, I think, because they're going to put you out. But I was like, please, because I was in so much pain. I was like, yes, I just want to be knocked out and not feel anything.
Yeah.
And so I was like, please take me. Like,
You're like, I'm
I'm ready.
ready. I'm ready.
Right. And I had no thoughts about dying. Like the fact that I think the fact that I was already alive at that point, like I knew I was going to die.
Yeah. Yeah, that
But
is
of course, I thought I was going to
incredible.
lose my leg, and I was in a wheelchair for almost 3 years, and so it really, when we think to ourselves like, how can our Creator allow bad things to happen to us? And I would say that that was a bad thing, or people losing children is a bad thing, but sometimes the reason is greater than whatever we're going to go through, right?
Uh-huh.
And the reason to me, for me, I think was greater because I learned a tremendous amount of life lessons. I learned that, um, the person who hit me, I think I feel more pain for because she was young and she was tribal and she left behind a child, and she didn't set out to say, oh, I'm going to go get drunk and drive my car and be crazy and kill somebody. She just made bad choices, right? And we all have made bad choices, and you can't blame her for that. What we can say is that nobody did anything to intervene, because I found out later, that she was supposed to be in rehab.
Oh,
She
okay.
was she was supposed to be in rehab. She was supposed to be, receiving the help she had, and no one stopped her. And I think that's a big a big issue, is that a lot of our kids today are growing up with this idea that nobody cares. I don't know if it's that they think that people don't care. I think that we have lost so many of our elders, that you and I were fortunate to have engaged with our elders and be grounded in our spiritual connections, through a traditional spiritual connection. It's different when the relationship that your people had with Creator, the the spiritual connection that people had, right? And so we've been taught those things, and I think our young people aren't being taught those things. And if they are being taught those things, they might be skewed in some way.
Yeah.
And I say that from, and as an Oglala person, you probably can recognize this. And my husband's Oglala Lakota, but all of these people who are doing sweats, right, in the Oglala style, it's like, and of course, Oglala people are like, yeah, everyone wants to be an Oglala. but but my grandfather, somebody had asked him one time, like, what do you think about that? And he said, his question was, what's wrong with the sweats creator gave us? Because our people had sweats
Yes, yes, yes.
in Hoopa.
Uh-huh.
And he wanted to know, why wouldn't you do that?
Yeah.
And there was really no answer. And I think that's the thing that happens, is that we take on another culture's, whether, even though it's another native culture, Oglala sweats, and I've participated in many of those on the reservation
Uh-huh.
in South Dakota. And I would say, and I have participated in some that are not from South Dakota, and they are like apples and oranges.
Okay. So I've never traditionally sweat back there, but I've
So
sweat
it's
here.
different, right?
Uh-huh.
Because you're being led by a spiritual, I don't know if I call them medicine people. I don't know that they call themselves that, but somebody who understands, and it just seems so much deeper.
Yes.
And that when other people take it on, like, my brother's always laughing because he works for a tribe where one of their tribal members claims to be a sun chief of the Oglala people.
Okay. And I find that's interesting that you come across people who are creating all these names for themselves. I'm like, I've never heard that, but
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, I don't know if any Oglalas. I've heard of wild Oglalas, but I've never heard of a wild Oglala sun chief.
Uh-huh.
And so it's like, when my brother asked him a little more, like, well, why would you call yourself, you're Paiute? What's wrong with being Paiute?
Yes.
What's wrong with being a Paiute leader? And so we've kind of lost our ways to our traditional things. And I get back to creator Yamach Chunye, which is what our word for him. And I'm saying that with a heavy English accent, means the one above us, right? And did was that Oglala's creator? I don't know.
Yeah.
I
Well,
don't,
from like
and maybe it's the same, but, and not saying that it's bad to be not the same, or to be different, or to be the same,
yeah.
but that's what we were given as Hoopa people. So we as Hoopa people should practice Hoopa things.
Yes.
And I get it. We have a lot of women today who are doing the 111, which is the chin tattoos,
Uh-huh.
right? And I saw a TikTok with this woman. She's a white woman, and she's like, yeah, I like this tattoo. She has a chin tattoos, 3 stripes, right? And people always think that I'm native, but I'm not. I just happen to like this tattoo, so why not wear it?
Oh my goodness. I had no idea the cultural appropriation. Uh,
Well, but is it?
I
I mean, she might have gotten it just for because she was being different, like wanting to, like, as kids, before I even knew of henna tattoos. I
yeah,
don't know if you did this in grade school, but we like to draw on our hands
yes.
flowers and stuff, on our thumbs and stuff. If we've never been exposed to henna tattooing, is that really cultural appropriation, or is that just being experimental?
Yeah. I guess it would be it comes down like the braids, right? Because people are like, oh, cornrows, that's a black thing. So then um some people are like, no, you're not supposed to wear those. And I guess it comes from the place of the heart, right? To me,
Yeah,
I would feel like her doing that is like ignorance because she's not learning where it comes from. You know what I mean? Or
right. But what if you're doing that because you have nothing, like, it's kind of like braids. I think that we probably had quite a few different intricate braids that we did as native people, and not a lot of that carried over as much as, the three hair braid, I guess you could say, because we had so much trauma.
Mhm.
And it's kind of like when you're busy and you have 10 things going on, you either forget your mascara, your water, your glasses, like, sometimes you just have to stick with whatever's simplest to get through that trauma. So maybe the simplest thing was a 3-hair braid
Yeah.
when you look at it through a different lens.
Yeah.
So I don't know. And I said, somebody said, oh, are you going to get the 111? And the 111 was not every woman had it or chose to even have it. It was something women got as a part of their life experience and coming through and a part of their beauty. And I said, no, I'm just going to take a permanent marking pin when the mood strikes me.
There you go. There you go. That is, yeah,
Because why can't we use it as an adornment? we
yes.
we adorn ourselves when we are in the mood, and we, like fingernail polish, we adorn ourselves when we want to, and then when we don't have to.
Yeah.
So why does it have to be I mean, I think everyone would find it shocking if I was running around with my tattoos, and maybe I don't want just the 3 hair, maybe I want dots all over my, you know what I mean? Like maybe I want something else. Like who's to say that I can't do that, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
But we learn ourselves. And as a woman, almost, I'll be 60 in November. I'm like, some of that stuff falls away. I'm like, go ahead and hate on me for that. I don't care. I'm old, and I'm getting old. I'm going to do what I'm going to do.
we've lost so much of our culture, but I'm sure it would have evolved. So at some point, are we creating our own ceremony, with what we do like on the daily, which would kind of like to your point of, does it have to be permanent? No, like today, I feel like representing who I am. I'm going into
Yeah.
this space and I want to really present my culture, and
Yeah.
I think that's one of the things. And with growing up with my culture, my kids they'll never have what I had. Even if we moved back, they'll never experience what I experienced, like butchering the sheep and like having all the aunties around and they're telling stories and like they're over the fire with the big grill and which is just fencing.
Right.
Not
Right.
a
Yeah. I'm
fencing
with you.
over
I'm with
fire.
you.
Yes. And then like they're doing the Nanesca and they're putting it, like my kids are they're never gonna experience it. Even if we go back, it's not gonna be the same because
Right.
those were the elders and they had their ways and it's really interesting. But like how is it that people are going to connect? Like you said with the Hoopa sweat, like how many people have access to that and how many people want to learn that, and how many people are putting themselves in that space. But I think because of our trauma and having to hide the culture, like my dad was half on the rolls half. He didn't look half, but he was from the generation where everybody had to say, I'm a half breed because you couldn't say you're full blood, So they were not wanting to share that they are native, or they would have to have like a non-native person buy stuff for them because people wouldn't sell to them, So I think like, and that wasn't that long ago.
No, we're talking the 60s.
Yes. So then it's like, okay, so if we're still experiencing that trauma, a lot of people didn't want to perform their culture, their ceremony, and it's like, okay.
Right. And nowadays, in my humble opinion, I have many, it's a classist thing that in order to, like Hoopa baskets, in order to have your child in a basket, it's like $1,500 to buy a baby basket.
Oh my God.
So then we're only allowing those people who can afford it to
Uh-huh.
have it, right? You
Yeah.
can only afford like this kind of jewelry,
Which is
if
beautiful. But
which is absolutely beautiful.
huh?
And this is made by one of our local Hoopa people who has likely been in fashion things. But this, I happen to have bought this piece before she kind of exploded, so it was more affordable. But now this is something like this is going for $2,000 to $2,500, something that your average everyday tribal member can't afford. And so it really is causing cultural disparity in our community, because like our women, our girls ceremony, we have a ceremony, the kilften,
Yeah. Ooh.
but that's how we say it.
Wow, because it sounds like ours kind of. Kina flat.
Right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, yours is a done, ours a
Oh,
done.
wow.
Anyway, our women's puberty ceremony. Our medicine people charge thousands of dollars, if not actual money. It probably costs close to $18,000 to put a ceremony on for your daughter if she's had her puberty, if she's coming to her womanhood,
Uh-huh.
and so now it means that only those people who have wealth can do it,
Yeah.
right? Only those people who can do it. So how do we make it so that everyone can experience it and everyone can be acknowledged? Because everyone, there's even a book about the Hoopa, the women's puberty ceremony, and it's like, oh, we're bringing it back, but we're only bringing it back for those people who can afford it. So how do we bring it back so that it becomes something for everything? Because I heard somebody told me a story recently about this husband and wife, and the husband was saying, like, I just tell my woman what to do and she better do it, otherwise she's going to get a backhand.
Oh my gosh.
I'm like, he's forgetting that our women were very highly respected. You had to pay a lot of money to have one. Most often there was a bride price attached to it. So
Yeah.
listen, loser.
Yes, exactly. So there was this story. It was so funny. I don't know if I shared it with you, but it's like, oh, when the Americans, I would call it Americans, they were observing the Lakota people, and the wife was two steps behind the husband, and they're like, "Oh, look at that! Like, oh, she's so submissive. That's right. She stands a good distance away from him. She's falling in line." Like from the outside, they're like, "Yeah, look at this." And then when they come to find out, they're like, no, she's walking behind him to make sure he knows where he's going to tell him which way.
I was going to say so she could kick him.
Yes, it was so funny. Yeah.
Right. And even like, the Haudenosaunee, the Oneida and Seneca people of the East Coast, that the women are the ones who select the chiefs.
I think men just latched onto the patriarchal narrative.
Colonized thought process.
Because prior to colonization, there was definitely matriarchy again across the nation. I came across it. I don't remember what I was looking for, but Benjamin Franklin wrote notes, right? He had journals, and he had visited this village outside of wherever he was at, I guess the colonies, and these missionaries, they were like, oh, they're gonna go visit the villagers. I can't remember what tribe it was, but I'm pretty sure it's probably like
It must have been a Virginia tribe.
yeah. So then
Interestingly enough, they've only recently become re-recognized,
I
but that's a whole nother story.
yeah. So then so they go to visit, right? And then they welcome them, they give them food, they give them hard cider, which back in the day they were creating their own alcohol. They provide it with the Americans, and they're like, hey, come on in, let's chit chat. And so Benjamin Franklin notates that how they had like the chiefs and important people in the middle, and then the women were outside the circle, but they were the historians. He said that the women listened, and like 30 years later you could go back and it would be the same story as what had happened then, because they were such good record keepers. And I was like, yeah, Native woman's always going to remember what you did.
Yeah, a lesson we will never forget.
Yes. But I thought that was so great because he was showing like everyone had their place and everyone was important within that moment. Yeah. But
Yeah, no, for sure. And that's when you sent me the questions about like what are you currently reading, and what are you you know who would you like to have dinner with, which I thought was very interesting. I've always wanted to have dinner with Larry Flint.
okay. That
Larry Flint, as you know, Larry Flint was the publisher of Hustler magazine, and the reason I would like to meet with him is because if it wasn't for his actions, the of allowing us to have freedom of speech, that it could have been a different place. And so today I would like to have dinner with his fifth wife, which was the last wife he had. Her name is Liz, and I would like to, if she's still alive. I don't know if she's still alive or not, but I know that she's still the head of the company, of Larry Flynt's company, and that just makes me think that she's in that space. People like to say, "Oh, I'm a Christian. I'm so against, pornography, blah blah blah." But some of the states that have the biggest pornography stores are like Georgia and Texas. Like all those Bible Belt stores where they close the bars
Yes.
at midnight on Saturday because they have church on Sunday. But
Yeah.
the flip side is, who knows? I don't know what time their porno stores close, but the fact that they haven't banned them from the state says a lot to me.
Yes. In New
I would like to see
Mexico,
those wives, like, try to close down their porno stores in Georgia. I doubt it's going to happen.
that would never happen. So in Fruitland in New Mexico, it's very church, right? There's a lot of Mormons and a lot of Methodists and Christians and Baptists and whatever, but they have these huge like porn shops, and then there'll be like a billboard. It's like Jesus is watching you. It's like this is so weird.
Oh,
Yeah.
great. You're going to have a threesome whether you like it or not.
Yes, because he's watching you. That's pretty funny.
Didn't know you were such a voyeur.
Yes. That is too funny.
But so I like to I would like to, those are the places I'd like to have minds. And I actually just recently started rereading The Elegant Universe, which is about builds on the theory of macro. So Einstein had the theory of relativity. So it's like relativity and macro science with and the reason I like it is because it really kind of lends credence to there's interdimensions.
Okay, yeah.
And I think that we like to think again, as humans, we like to think we're in this dimension, in this time, but that doesn't explain a lot of things. It doesn't explain why Native people knew that there were 7 stars in the Pleiades when you can't see them with the naked eye.
Right? I
It,
know. That is
like
so
all of these things that they understood. And the only way Western scientists like to say they like to say, oh well, it's because we had aliens who came here and told the Mayans and everybody this is how it goes. And I think that's just a way of negating Native knowledge.
yes, definitely. Like that whole show, Ancient Aliens, right? So I absolutely love reading books like the one Pretty Shield. Have you heard of that? There's Cheyenne, it's Cheyenne medicine woman. White guy like interviewed her and then wrote the book. But also Water Lily. And I think that's Vine Deloria and it's her or it's Water Lily's one of the relatives. But in there, they just common being in the culture, you'll know that impossible things happen, right? Like, so one of the things in I believe it was Water Lily. So she is out on the plains, right? The prairie. So super flat, because if you've been out there, you can see it's pretty flat, except for the hills far away. So she's
Yeah.
on the prairie and she sees the soldiers. And she's just like, oh my gosh, they're definitely gonna see me. So then she prays to the creator. She picks up sand and throws it and runs, and they never saw her. So then she used that like, oh, this will be like make me invisible kind of thing. And she ran away and then never saw her. Okay, so then in Pretty Shield, one of their village tribal people got kidnapped and they wanted to go on a rescue mission. So this man had sweat and he did ceremony and he came out and he was like, I'm the one that's supposed to go. I got a message. So he painted himself with dragonflies because he said, this is my medicine. And he alone went to the enemy camp, rescued the person, and then came back. And nobody had saw them. They didn't, nobody was alerted, nothing. They went in there silently, came back. And then there was another story of this book because I love going into old bookstores and looking for native books. A mother had one son and he went on a hunting party and never came home. And she was so sad about it. And I think it's in Northern California, this story, because it was stories from all over. And then she was so sad and she was just like heartbroken over her son. And she had prayed to the creator and had said, please, please, before I die, I'm getting old and I'm sick. Please let me see him again. And he showed up because when he
Mm.
was on the hunting party, he got lost. He went into a cave. And when he went into the cave, it took him to another land, which I think is another dimension. And he had a whole family there. And when he came back, he hadn't aged that much. And he came back to see his mom because he said, I knew you were sick. I was told to come see you again. And he told her how he had a family and like he was living with the wife's people there and that he wanted to see her one more time. And then she was able to die happy. And then he went back to wherever he came from. So, I mean, I think these stories exist in our culture, throughout time memoriam, but in where we are today, the white culture, I guess, tries to scrub us from it because I don't know, I guess makes us easier to
Well, I think our brains aren't big enough to accept things we can't explain, right? And that's so the Elegant Universe was written like 25 years ago, but it and there's been more advances that have been made in macro science where you're talking about things smaller than atoms, right?
okay, yeah.
And then if we bring it all around to like traditional culture, we know that all of our people have had their stories in all of our tribes where experiences have happened that are unexplainable. And I think that that's, very telling of how open we were to having those experiences. And Bigfoot
Yes.
Bigfoot is a thing that I follow on,
Uh-huh.
on stuff on YouTube. And the recently I saw this a YouTube video people, I guess podcast or whatever. They do it's called A Flash of Beauty. And so they did this interview with this woman who's like a psychic medium. And she has met with Bigfoot, or this particular Bigfoot, whose name is something like Anon. Like
Okay.
he gave her name. She said she's not getting, it's not like he talks to her, but images are put in her mind, right?
Okay.
For the messages. And so she's had many conversations with this one, and they're interdimensional beings, right? That's
That
what
makes
they are. They live in a different land, but they like to come to this dimension and they like the food here or something. Anyway, she happened to ask him what was the thing he missed. And again, this conversation isn't in English, it's in images. And what he showed her was that he missed being with the native people
oh
that he used to have. Yeah, they used to have relationships with,
yeah.
and that he missed that. This particular Bigfoot, I don't know how old he is or whatever, but it was really interesting because, our Hoopa culture, we believe that Bigfoot was not a part of our tribe per se, but participated in our ceremonies.
Really?
And so there was a disagreement that happened, and he took his regalia and never came back, or they took their regalia and never came back.
That is so
So I think I always I thought that was interesting. I was like, oh, okay. But a lot of the Pacific Northwest Indians, I think many of them have had similar stories where the people participated with them as well. So
really.
yeah,
Well, my husband loves anything Bigfoot aliens, right? So he's very much into a little people also.
yeah.
And
And we have little people too, right?
okay, yeah.
But again, they have to be interdimensional. They must be interdimensional beings. They can't be, because they're not always there, right?
Yeah.
But we believe that they come, like for our ceremonies. After we do our ceremonies, they do theirs in the
That,
same space, in the same places. So you can't go into those places
uh-huh.
after we're done.
That's interesting. Okay, so have you been into spaces that are like unmarked or whatever, but you just get that feeling like I think there was something here, kind of like this is where people did things, you know?
Oh yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. And it's kind of, so I also, John or Joseph Marshall is another one who's written. He's written a lot about. He's written a lot of good books, but he's written about Crazy Horse,
Okay.
and he was old enough to have interviewed people who grew up with people who knew Crazy Horse, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
So um, he was saying that, like in one of the books, they were talking about when you are hunting or you are looking to see where the enemy is, you don't stare at them for very long. You have to make sure your glances are quick because the power of visually staring, and I think this is true, is so powerful that people can feel it, right?
Yeah.
And you and I have both probably had experiences where we feel like someone's staring and we turn and look and they are.
Uh-huh.
And so I think, but how many people have recognized those kinds of feelings? And so I thought it was very powerful as a warrior technique that you're taught not to stare at the enemy for very long if you are observing them, because they will feel it.
Yeah. I
And it's
agree with that because I've been driving, right? And just kind of like a little auto zoning out.
yeah.
And then all of a sudden I felt it. And I would look and it would be somebody I know and they'll be waving.
And it's like our ancestors everywhere. I had just come back from spending a lot of time, excuse me, with my older son who's 40.
Oh, really? I started to look, I thought we were definitely both in our 30s.
No. But I feel like it to a certain extent. I think the great thing about getting older is a lot of the stuff I was self-conscious about in my 20s, I don't have anymore. Which
Oh,
can be a good thing and bad thing.
no,
Um,
I
but
totally feel
anyway,
that.
back to my son. And they are men traditionally eel. So they hook fish during the day. It's mostly at night, and they have these big, long, very long, very long hooks.
Oh, wow.
Traditional hooks that and they used to use lanterns. Now they use flashlights to see the lamprey fish, which is a long eel looking thing. And he's been going to places that haven't been fished at traditionally in a long time,
Okay.
like that. And he went with his partner and her son, and she took a picture of him out at the ocean on this particular beach where nobody, it's just them, right? They're just there. And in the picture, it looks like there are people standing by him, and there's people standing near them by the fire where she took the picture.
Oh,
And
wow.
there's like five, it looks like there's five different people in the picture. Um and they're like, what do you think about that? And I said, I think that the ancestors are happy that you're there.
Huh?
And I think that they've been fishing and they're happy that somebody else is there fishing with them.
Yes.
And so they were just excited to be there. But it's a really amazing photograph. Now, you could go ahead and try to explain away and say it's a trick of the light, or you could say, oh, it was the mist of the ocean and it's doing all these things, but it. But for us, it was the ancestors acknowledging the traditional activity.
Yes, I absolutely believe that. Yeah. That is so beautiful because it's like these echoes and these traces, like to bring us home, like who we are internally, like genetically, like who, our genetic memories, our culture. Because I
Right.
there are clues here. And, throughout wherever we go, like these just little, like I said, callings or something, to be like, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and I think that's why, like, working in the environmental field is so important, and it's so important to have Native people in there, because they always talk a lot about traditional ecological knowledge, and tribes across the nation have so much knowledge. I mean, there are tribes who have words for mammoths.
Uh-huh.
There are tribes who have words for the American lion, and all of these animals lived like 10,000 years ago. Why would tribes have words for those things if they didn't exist at those same times? Right?
Yes.
even the geology. And because we were such observers, that if tribes had been allowed to continue the practice of cultural burnings in California alone, not mentioning even other states, we wouldn't have the disastrous wildfires that we have today. But
Yes.
the wildfires today are a direct result, in my opinion, of native caretaking of the lands being halted, because we can only take care of our lands, right? Our reservations.
Yes.
But we didn't just take care of our reservations. We've taken care of vast areas of lands for centuries before the coming of the white man.
Yeah.
And we, as a result of that having stopped in the 1800s, we're seeing these kind of disastrous wildfires and having even bigger impacts to our air quality as a result of that. When if we would go back to the traditional burning, and there are so many tribes engaged in Northern California who are engaged in those cultural burning practices, who are, some of them are going across the nation trying to implement those practices, because we understood the difference between a cold and hot fire, like those temperatures, and that there are many plants that we ate from, that we gathered and ate, that have come used to human interaction. So many of our plant species of traditional foods that we would eat are crying out for human interaction to begin again. So,
Yes.
like in Northern California, it's our wild potatoes, which, potato is a relative term, but that plant needs the interaction of people digging it to prosper
Yeah.
and to flourish. And there's many plants like that across. And we can't we don't have the science to prove it. Well, if we look at saffron's a plant that is used in many Mediterranean foods, right? That saffron absolutely cannot be produced without human intervention.
Okay.
Not at all. Like if you look it up, it can't,
Yeah.
because so many thousands of years of human intervention have created that symbiotic relationship. And the last people that have had a symbiotic relationship with Earth is Native people. And if we have to, in the time of those dirty words like climate change or global warming, we can deny all we want, but Native people know, even if Native people argue that it's cyclic, we know that Earth changes.
Yeah.
We know that Earth is changing. And guess what? Mother Earth is a lot stronger than we are.
Yes. That, and you know what? I think that if we would stop saying save the earth, instead save ourselves, people would actually click in, because the earth
We're
is
selfish.
so long, like, come on now. We're not really gonna kill the earth. We're actually gonna kill ourselves through bad air,
Yeah.
bad water, lack of resources, stuff. And I don't think people like to make that connection that no, we are going to die and the earth is going to continue on and the animals are going to come back and the plants, but not all the plants, but yeah, because some of them
Yeah.
human interaction. But I think we need to I'm like, that message needs to get out, not like save the earth. Like, no, she's going to be fine without us. She'll miss us. But at the same time, it's like we're the one, poisoning the water, polluting the air. And it's just like, but going back to the cultural burns, I was looking for a plant. I think it was like huckleberry or something, and that needs fire. And manzanita, that also needs fire. So when we're not burning these forests, we're doing such a disservice to the native plants. I think it would be so interesting that if they would allow for the traditional management practices to come back, to see how many plants would actually show up again, because I think it would be, I think we just don't have a accurate catalog, unless we could start digging around in the museums to see what was cataloged, to see what's really here.
Oh yeah, and those things are all. It's like when we take things to make regalia. Like even this is has, I don't know if you could see it. I'll try to. It's braided bear grass, and bear grass requires fire in the fall before the spring that you plan to pick it.
Uh-huh.
And part of it has to do with insects, having a stronger fiber. It becomes stronger with fire.
Okay, that makes
Like there's all these reasons why. I don't know if you can, let's see.
Oh yeah, that's so pretty.
So the grass has to be burned the fall before. And if it's not, then you can't pick it, right?
Yeah. You have done a lot within your lifetime. Washington, DC, like you've done all kinds of stuff. So, I was talking with my kids the other night, like, because I've dragged them all over too.
Yeah.
I'm not afraid to go into like whatever space, but I was a lot more quiet. Like, with age, you become more vocal. What advice would you give to people to start taking up space, one, and going into these spaces? Like how, because it can be a little intimidating sometimes. Or if you walk into a space where you're the only brown person, and everybody in there is white, and they're all like, and you're just like, oh, okay, like, so what advice, especially for young natives who want to go into environmental professionalism or environmental professional career, and they have to go into these spaces?
I think one of the big things is, and I recognize it more now that as I get older, I recognize it more, and it's interesting. A couple weeks ago, I was invited to Wade Crowfoot, who's the director of the California's Natural Resource Conservation Agency, and I was invited to his coffee with NGOs. So he did a coffee with non-governmental organizations, and somehow NAEPC. We were the only Indian organization there. Or no, we weren't. Save the California Salmon was also there. And so I went, and I felt like it was an opportunity to take up space. And they asked us to introduce ourselves and tell us something we were happy about, right? and I told the story about my accident and how in that period of time that one of the things, because they did think I was going to lose my leg, that I had to have 3 bone grafts, right? And bone grafts they're not like taking an actual bone and putting it in your body. They're taking like bone mush, right? And they take this bone mush and they pack it into the area. And I was missing the 2 bones that go down your calf, right? And so they packed it in there. And the whole time I'm thinking, these guys are crazy. Like, do these doctors really like they expect this bone mush to somehow magically form into 2 bones? Like, how does it know to do that? So
Yeah.
and it obviously hadn't worked 2 times before. So what makes them think the 3rd time it's going to work? And so they did. And when I went back in 3 months later for my X-ray to see how it was going, you could see faint outlines of bones. And I was just absolutely amazed that my body took that mush finally and started to make 2 bones with it.
That
And I'm like,
look at you
and I
go.
said, why I shouldn't have been amazed, because our bodies are amazing, and our bodies are made to do, to automatically heal itself. And it knew what to do with bone, and it knew that, and I needed to have those 2 bones. And I related it to the earth. Like, the earth knows what it needs.
Mm.
We need to let it do what it needs to do, and we need to do what it takes for us to be more responsible in how we're responding to it, right?
Yeah.
Doing good things. slowing down on our polluting, all those things. And I said, so, I'm glad to be alive today, and Mother Earth is glad too. And she's hoping we're hearing her. And if we don't hear her, we ultimately will all pay the price.
Yes.
Yeah. Not. And they were like, wow, that was amazing. Right. So, but then afterwards, they were having a meeting, and someone says, oh, you're tribal. Are you going to the salmon meeting? And I said, what salmon meeting? And they said, oh, there's a salmon meeting downstairs. And I said, really? And I didn't know anything about it. And I said, well, maybe I should go ahead and go into that space. I didn't know. When I got in there, I was told by somebody, oh, how did you get an invite? And I said, oh, I wasn't invited. I just happened to be in the building and came. Oh, really? Because this is an invite only meeting.
Oh,
I
no.
go, it was. Oh. So I didn't say anything. And it really was like, it was all with these man panels.
Yeah.
And it was a speak at you. And about 80% of the room was women. And so I thought it was interesting that the whole time all we're doing is listening to these man panels, right? And this one, and I'm thinking, this isn't what I thought I wanted the whole time. I wanted to say, I'm sorry. I thought this was about save the salmon and the salmon climate. The meeting was called California Salmon Climate Strategy.
Oh, okay.
I hadn't heard anything about the strategy. I've been sitting there, it's 3 o'clock now, and I'm like, I ate the meal for free because I'm not going to leave a free meal on the table. And and I'm thinking, this is the boringest meeting. All I'm hearing is man panels, and they're not really saying anything new. We're not getting to anything. And this elderly man from another tribe spoke up, and he's like, excuse me, when are we going to get to talk to you? Because we're doing, all that's happening is we're being spoken at. You're not speaking with us. You're not speaking to us. You're speaking at us. When are we going to have a real conversation about saving the client, saving the salmon and climate strategy? When are we going to get to that?
Yeah.
Because I don't have time for this. He said, I'm getting ready to go. I was just like, bless his heart, because that's how I was feeling. I left shortly after that.
Uh-huh.
Because we promised after the next panel. I was like, no, they should have scrapped their whole thing at that point. And there were very few tribes there. And so getting back to my advice to young people, and I'll, I need to, and most of the time I do this. If I'm feeling like the conversation is more of being spoken at versus with or to, like amongst, then we need to raise our hand and ask questions. And I don't, it gets back to that old saying, there is no dumb question. Ask questions, because I can guarantee you someone else in the room is asking themselves the same thing. You just have to be brave enough to give voice to it. And if you are brave enough to give voice to it, then that allows somebody else to come forward. And maybe nobody else will. And it's okay. If nothing else, you are creating space for yourself and your ancestors.
Yes, exactly. I think that is so perfect. Ask those questions. Just throw your hand up there and just put some steel in your spine and just ask away, because I have been in so many meetings where people ask questions and I've never said, oh, that was stupid. Like,
No.
the time it creates more, even if they stumble through the question, it creates more dialogue, and then more people start discussing things,
Well,
but,
my favorite time was one of the, I'll tell you privately who it was, but we were in this training and the guy was speaking like, we are all here today to learn about emergency operations. We will be referring to federal regulation, blah, blah. Like it was all just
oh my
flat
God,
the
yeah.
whole day. So it's almost lunchtime, and he goes, do we have any questions? And I was sitting there thinking, no, like I need a break. This guy is putting me to sleep. And she raised her hand. She's like, excuse me, your tone is really dry and it's putting me to sleep. I'm a diabetic, and if you don't like perk it up or something, try to make some, changes in the way you're speaking, you're
Uh,
going to put everyone to sleep after lunch. And how are we going to learn anything if if all you're going to do is talk like that?
oh my gosh, that is too funny, but she hit the point. Like, yes, come on, man. You
I'm laughing.
have to speed this
And I
up.
was And I was like, oh my God, that was so perfect. And he's like, oh, okay. He didn't really know how to take it. And he's like, okay, well, we'll break for lunch. And he did. After lunch, he did try to put a little more oomph in it, but it was just really horrible. And I thanked her afterwards. And she's like, oh, I'm probably going to get fired because my boss didn't like me asking that question. She's like, but seriously, he's putting me to sleep. And I said, he was putting all of us to sleep.
Yes.
So I'll make sure to ask more questions because it is dangerous. But even that's not a dumb question
Oh,
because the
okay, thank
speaker is
you.
like, if you're going to speak in front of people, oh my gosh, you need to have some pizzazz in your voice. You're
Yeah,
going to kill everyone.
but it's funny. But if she hadn't said anything, he would have still been dragging on.
Oh
And
yeah, it was horrid.
that's pretty good. Yeah.
Awesome. Well,
Okay.
I had been doing a Monday Night Live. I'm going to talk about it on Monday Night Live. I'm going to start it back up. People have been bothering me since last June to start it back up, and I've just taken my time with it. But I'm going to bring it back again.
Yes, you need to because before I started this, I was like, oh, there's so many podcasts already with Native people, blah blah. But really, there isn't because now that I've been in here, this is like my fifth, no, sixth podcast, but doing research and really looking at who is in this space. There's not enough people in this space, like how are we going to create our indigenous excellence and take our space up in American culture when we don't have enough variety for people to say, hey, we're still here, we're doing things like
Right. And we don't, we're not all wearing feathers all the time.
exactly. That's the thing too, because I have a friend who I love her so much and I want her to talk on finance because she's in the finance industry, but she works for the Department of the Treasury. And she's like, well, I have to wait until I'm no longer appointed because what she says. And I was like, okay. But yeah, she's definitely like, goes in and does her job and I love that about her. So that's
Yeah.
the gambit that we have here. We run the facet. So okay, so I don't want to take up any more of your time, even though I could keep going on and on and on. I appreciate you
It
being
was a
there.
pleasure. All right, cool.
Okay,
Thanks.
bye.
Bye.